Hello, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Innovation. Today, I have a conversation with Dr. Gautham Vadakkepatt, Assistant Professor of Marketing and Founding Director for the Center for Retail Transformation at George Mason University. We give a sneak peek on what the center is up to and then talk about the evolution of social audio and our thoughts on Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, Spotify Green Room, and what is becoming my new favorite platform, Callin. If you haven't heard of Callin, it's because it's in private beta. I happen to finagle a tester invite and doing a lot of experimentation with it. We actually recorded this conversation in Callin. Now, my audio is a little wonky, but Gotham's is strong, so I decided to go with what we had. Give it a listen and let us know what you think. Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Innovation. I'm Jeff Roster, former Gartner and IHL retail sector analyst, now doing advisory work on several boards and the co-host of This Week in Innovation. And I have today my guest host, Gautham. I'll let you introduce yourself and go into great detail about what we're doing at the Center for Retail Transformation.
Great. All right. Thank you, Jeff. My name is Gautham Vadakkepatt, and I am a newly minted associate professor at George Mason University. And I'm also the founding director of the Center for Retail Transformation, on which board of advisors you serve, Jeff, and thank you very much for that. And just for the audience, the Center for Retail Transformation is a center that's focused on supporting small and medium-sized retailers through things that an academic institution can do very well, which is research, which is education, and which is trying to create thought leadership that is focused to that space. And so we have a bunch of activities coming up soon, including workshops and panels around critical problems in retail, getting students to work with companies in a hands-on perspective, trying to organize summits that help bring together people in the retail ecosystem to address these problems. And probably using social audio platforms to try and get the word out at some point of time.
There you go. And so you're going to be focusing mostly what?
Really good point. We are actually trying to get the small and medium-sized retailers into the new retail ecosystem, which essentially means to get them to be digitally enabled and data-driven and to focus on the critical challenges with regards to supply chain and people. So we have the retail sector actually is a large contributor to the employment, and a lot of them are frontline employees. And with the technology revolution that's happening, or the fourth industrial revolution, if you will, we need to upskill and get them ready for the new workspace. Right, so we are actually focused more on the technology and the data part of things.
So words like cloud, maybe even blockchain, definitely live video feeds, basically machine learning,
AI, actually working with a cloud company. We're working with a few analytics companies and a blockchain company to try and increase transparency in the supply chain. So yeah, those are the kind of things that we are trying to focus on. Not the merchandising. Tracing the merchandising, yes, but not the merchandising planning.
And how would retailers and technology providers, how would they engage with us at the Center for Retail Transformation?
So we are a startup center. So as with anything startup, we are getting the word out, and being on the social audio platforms is one way. But the easiest way would be to track me down on LinkedIn or look at if you do Google search George Mason University Center for Retail Transformation, it will take you to yet to be fully fleshed out web page, but that gives you a contact position at least. That would be the easiest way to reach out to us.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So let's segue into our social audio discussion. So you teased it a little bit that we want to use social audio as a way of driving education in retail and assisting your students. How do you see that? Because that's actually new. I'm glad to hear you say that. So tell me what our current thinking is.
The current thinking, and from my perspective, is that let's take two things, right? Like one is that if you want to really know what the future is, the best way is to try to get the students' perspective on this. So social audio can be a way to do two things. One is to get real-time data on what's the real market situation. And the second is to provide platform for the Gen Zers and the upcoming groups to share their perspective. So what you will see coming out shortly from us is activity and programs around that where we have student groups working on certain challenges like what's the store of the future look like. And then they're going to actually part of the class that I'm teaching, they're going to present this from their perspective on these social audio platforms. And it just allows them, one, getting engaged in a real-time social live streaming element. It breaks the monotony of teaching and allows them to share their perspectives. And sharing perspectives is the whole point of social audio. So that's one. And the second aspect is there's a lot of research on a lot of things that are relevant to industry. And oftentimes they are quite difficult to translate unless the person who's created those articles themselves talk about it. So we'll be bringing in researchers who work on things like AI or, for instance, I know you don't like this word, Jeff, but omnichannel and the issues with balancing the different channels, and try to get them to share their findings with the audience.
We're doing so well until he had to bring up the O word.
I know, but I had to. I also know your trigger points now.
Yeah, so does my wife. That doesn't mean. Listen, I mean, we're gonna at some point have to have a full debate about omnichannel.
Use customer touch points, and I'm sure we can debate whether that's appropriate even.
No, that's perfectly fine because it's true and it's accurate. Yeah. Anyway, so you want to use social audio platforms as a way of letting the students engage, learn how to speak, probably, I think, engage with the retail industry fairly well. I'm just curious, and by the way, I happen to agree with it, but I'm just curious if somebody says, well, why don't you just do that on Zoom or YouTube? What's different about social audio versus existing channels that are already being used?
So you are two things, right? One is it's a very dynamic and fluid environment, right? People could ask questions that you're not prepared for. And the Zoom context is something where it's an invitation only, right? In most cases. And so you have a more controlled environment. Here you don't, and people can walk in and walk out. That allows for conversations to be more organic and fluid. It's a positive and a negative of social audio, but it allows the students to have that ability to react, and which is very important in the real world, to instantaneous comments and things in a much more chaotic manner, if that makes sense. And so that's one of the things. And I'm not going to say that it's not something that we won't do in Zoom. Some of these things might be in Zoom. But think about this, Jeff, right? It's easy for me to talk on a phone, and I could be doing other things, or like I'm doing now, pacing around and doing these things. But in a video kind of a context, I got to sit in front and I got to pay attention and other things. I could turn my camera off. So there are some things that the audio only platform allows that a video platform might not. So that's my quick reaction to it.
I think when I'm looking at this, now that I've, logged, I don't know how many 100 hours on social audio since February 1st, I think if I was starting over again as a junior analyst and I wanted to get up to speed on how to present in front of people, I really think this platform is far better for all those reasons you said. It just feels more like a presentation I'm going to give versus a Zoom call. Now, I'm not sure why. I know when I'm presenting, I'm looking out over sometimes a sea of one face, which is the worst case scenario, or a sea of hundreds, which is the best because they all blend together. It's just a big blur. But I like this platform for all those reasons. And I think if I'm training future leaders, I want them in this kind of environment where they have to manage variables. If we pop this thing, we do one of our seminars on either Callin or Spotify or Clubhouse, there is that unknown variable, which is really important for speakers to have to manage and to understand, because you're going to get that. If you're doing a presentation out in the industry, yeah, you got to be prepared for who knows who it can pop in. So I like that piece of the simulation also.
Yeah, and the other aspect, right, if you go back to the Zoom environment and all of that, oftentimes you have a support that's outside of your words. What do I mean by that? You have a PowerPoint slide that's running in the background and you're doing all these things. Right. In this case, you're down to the very bare essence. And I always tell this to anyone, and I've been taught this many a time. It's about how you tell and how quickly you can distill to the particular point. And this allows you to do that. I think, this is just a personal opinion, I'm sure people will have different reactions to it. But it allows you to distill to that very particular point very quickly without any of those support systems. And I'm talking without any PowerPoint slide or anything. And I think that's a kind of a raw state in which you are that allows you to be more of your authentic self. There are challenges to that, right? You have to censor your conversations, or maybe not, depending on your own preference. But that's what I like about the social audio discussion.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I just got done doing a room with Paula Rosenblum, who's a fellow analyst, and we were talking about what founders need to know about the analyst world. And we were talking about that idea of storytelling and how she had a lot of the same, not concerns aren't the right word, but she noticed a lot of the problems that I'd noticed with founders, that not really being able to tell their story or relying on decks too much. And I think you hit on that key point, is that this is more of a storytelling platform. So if we're training leaders, we got to teach them how to tell a story without having to have a crutch.
I'm with you, and I have worked with several startups myself. And it's funny when I just tell them, like, give me 3 lines of what your company is about and what really makes it unique. It's difficult for many of them. And I'm like, let's take off all these other things and just answer that. Let's start there. And so it is a training process. It's a way to think through things. And I think these social audio discussions, it's just one other way to train your muscles, right? You're not always going to lift weights. You're going to do some cardio too. You're going to do some more aerobic exercises. It's similar. You got to do all these things in conjunction. I'm not saying I will disregard video presentations, but you got to be fluid in all these different ways of communicating. And it's my job to get the next generation up and ready for this challenge.
So when do you think we're going to have our first seminar or student, session on either Clubhouse or Callin?
So August 25th is when the semester gets together. So you'll be seeing activities in September. Early September will be the first kind of presentation.
Wow, that's really exciting. Are any other universities doing this yet, or are we going to be the first out of the block?
I'm not sure if universities. There are obviously a lot of professors who are on, especially Clubhouse, and I actually a couple of times on Twitter Spaces as well. But I've not seen the universities adopt it. And of course, like, the joke is that universities sometimes can be laggards in adoption of innovation. And that students can be the early innovators for adoption. So there could be that's happening here as well. And there's always the risks that come with these kind of live events. And that's always a challenge. So long-winded answer saying, hey, I don't know. I would suspect that there's not many universities who are programmatically on these social audio platforms. But I can say that from the center perspective, we will be on it in the fall semester.
Yeah, that's exciting. So that's a good place to transition into maybe discussion of the various platforms that you've seen so far, and what are your thoughts? So let's start with probably the big one, Clubhouse. What do you like? What do you not like about Clubhouse?
What do I like about it? It's the first mover, right? That was as a person who's on Android, and I had heard all of my retail friends and real other friends getting on it. And I was like, God, give me a chance to just be on it. And so I think that's one. You have to give credit for someone to have innovated a way and created a buzz around something. One would have thought that just audio-only platform should have been in existence a while back. And it wasn't for whatever reason. And now we have that scenario. And so I like Clubhouse for that reason. Having been on it so that scarcity kind of a thing. Hey, I'm a cool kid. I got to try it. I love that fact. And it seems like it's attracted a set of business people on there. And I haven't, at least with regards to the green room, it wasn't the case. You see a lot more sports, right? On the Spotify green room. So that's the second aspect that I like about the social audio Clubhouse. But to be quite frank, I'll have to switch to the negatives. I don't know if you want me to go in there.
No, absolutely. Are you kidding me? I'm an analyst, man. I live in the negatives.
Yeah, so I have stated this before, right? This is a creator economy kind of a thing, right? So all of these social audio platforms are just ways to allow the creators to create and to communicate to their specific target audiences and get them more engaged. To that extent, we don't see a whole lot of opportunity to discover, opportunity to actually engage once that event has happened. You and I have talked about this before. Like, I really think that the future is that you should be able to create these events, these rooms, record it, and then have a second life. And the ability to share that second life content, be it through small video clips or transcripts of these things, is critical to maintain this ecosystem. And as of now, I don't see, I know the Clubhouse just released that back channel, but I couldn't find it on the Android version. Maybe I just haven't looked hard enough. Even just that engagement amongst people who are in the room is still missing. And I think that's important to get going at the very minimum. I'm just talking about the most basic stuff.
So I would agree, which is why when I'm doing my Clubhouse rooms, 100% of them are recorded and they go into This Week in Innovation. But I would guess probably, I don't know, 4 or 5% maybe the rooms are that case. So that is purely FOMO if you're missing out, if you're not there. Now, some of the rooms, like the political rooms, like libertarian stuff, some of the crypto rooms, probably I'm thinking the folks in those rooms specifically do not want to be recorded. They're more whatever, just want a conversation and want it to be dead. The stuff I do and the stuff we would do is absolutely designed for multiple purposes.
Yeah, and I agree, right? That was my point with regards to censoring of comments and how you could say things that might not be appropriate. That's the downside of these things. But on the flip side, there could be a lot of positive organic things that could have emerged from these conversations, real nuggets that are forever lost. And so it's a question of balancing the positives with the negatives, as with anything. And my preference here is that I would like to think that more positives emerge if the moderators can play a really good job and moderate the session and navigate the session effectively. And so to that extent, like, it's lost forever, right? Like that piece of nugget, unless besides those few people. And also, to that point, think about this. Clubhouse came into existence just when COVID was at its peak. Right? People were at home. There's not the socialization element. Like, at this point, when people are reverting back to work, going back to work, I don't think you'll see that many people live at these events as you used to. I could be wrong, but the numbers seem to indicate there is some, at least the rate of growth of adoption seems to be declining. And Jeff, you might know more about this, but the App Annie data seems to suggest there's some plateauing or getting to the plateauing stage on it. But if you don't have this recording feature, then like you're losing that group of people who are not going to be able to consume it during regular periods of time.
So anecdotally, just looking around, Clubhouse went after the Hollywood, sort of the music industry. They wanted some very big names to come on, create these rooms, create a lot of buzz. And I think they were very successful in doing that. But in looking at a few of those rooms, and I certainly don't hang out there at all, but in looking at those rooms and listening to some of the complaints of the elite creators that are hoping to monetize that thing, I get the sense that those rooms are decaying because they're the same thing. You can only do a music room so many times before people say, okay, I've heard it. I don't need it. So in that regard, I think you're 100% correct. And I'm not sure how big live audio is. Now, I don't think you've bounced around on Callin much at all because I literally just drug you over, last night?
Yes, exactly. I have not been on Callin, so I don't even know.
So this thing here, this platform we're fooling around on now is designed to be a podcasting platform. And so we are being recorded. There is no discussion. There's no debate about it. We are, in fact, being recorded. And as part of the feature set for this thing, and it's still super beta early on, there's an editing feature which allows you to do what's called, what they're calling a highlight, what I'd call an audiogram, which is grabbing a minute or two of the content that is being recorded and push that out. So
yeah, I love it. I mean, that's
so
really
for for our applications, it's almost, now you can do that. I can do that. Let's say in Clubhouse, but what I have to do is I have to record, which I do, and I record on Rodecaster Pro. Then I grab that audio, dump that into Discrete, which is this text spacing app that you and I have been talking about. And then from there, I can create audiograms. There's other ways of doing that also. So this platform, they're actually making that a built-in functionality. Now, the functionality is pretty nascent, to say the least, but the concept is there for sure.
It's a step in the right direction. With any technology that's in the early stages, it's going to evolve. But fundamentally, you're removing frictions to sharing content, and that's what you just said they're doing, Callin is doing. And that sounds like a great idea. Perhaps along with that, they should make it into a social media sharing platform that allows you to transfer these things easily as well to create that built-in ecosystem.
I would think that's probably, obviously we haven't seen the development plan, but I got to think that's pretty high up on there. Once you've built in the ability to do a highlight, then you want to be able to push it out. And then it might already be there. I haven't really dug in that far. So which platform do you think you're going to, or is it too early to talk about which one do you want to use for our student speaking circuits that we're going to do? Have you thought about it?
It depends on it. Yeah, I have actually thought about it, actually partly in preparation for, since you dragged me in on this yesterday. Okay,
I plead guilty.
Yes, which channel will
You're the one that wanted an analyst, a loudmouth analyst on your advisory board. It's totally your fault.
I am so glad I made the decision. It's been a pleasure, and I always like to be pushed and challenged, which you do. So no complaints there. But to answer your question about what's the channel, right? So if it is in the context of retailing, for instance, or if it is in the context of technology, I think as I'm still getting a sense of Clubhouse, but I feel like that's where the people are to do it on Clubhouse. Whereas if it is in other contexts, I would migrate to Green Room. Like I really like the functionality of Green Room where it's easy to, it's recorded and you can put it into a podcast. And Green Room has, or Spotify rather, I forget, like they have 150 odd million premium subscribers. So the access to that information, like if you record it and post it out there, is so easy. And again, you're removing frictions to sharing that information, which I really love. So if I'm going to do something ephemeral and it's targeted towards more of a business audience, at this point of time, I think I will lean towards Clubhouse. If I'm going to do something where if it is something that I want to capture for posterity, I think I'm going to go towards Spotify's Green Room at this point of time, because it allows me the easy way to podcast things and move it into the GMU Retail Center podcast. That's my initial knee-jerk reaction, but things are changing, right? Like what happens when LinkedIn, and they're working on this, what happens when
100%.
Then I will actually stop 100%. All of these things and go to LinkedIn. Right? I think
it's a no-brainer. That's our audience. Yeah. That is exactly that's my audience. That's your audience. That's exactly where kids that want to become business leaders need to be. 100%.
Yeah, unless one of these platforms, and these are not right. Like this, these are all that get a sense of it. These are all more generalist platforms that can deal with all these different categories of content. Whereas LinkedIn is supposed to be a business-only kind of thing. Right. To that extent, I think that if LinkedIn is going to come out, and I thought they would have come out, I don't understand why it's taking this long. But whenever they do come out, it has to be coming soon. This is a brief, like I have a very particular position on all social audio applications. And it's a moment in time where you will see these applications pop up. And there's going to be, like history suggests that there's going to be a fight and there's going to be a shakeout and there'll be 2 or 3 dominant ones. So you can't be so late to the game that whole movement is past. I think, Clubhouse has 10 million. And if you think about Green Room, they just started and maybe they'll capture a few million soon. There's not a whole lot of creators out there. So, and we never even talked about Twitter, the spaces.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that's silly. The last thing I want to do is do anything more on Twitter than I absolutely have to.
Yeah, but we should give them the one good thing about Twitter is that they have 199 million daily users or 200 million daily users. I forget what they're.
I don't know how many of those are bots though. So when I look at Twitter engagement, I'm at 6,200 followers on Twitter, and I'm at like 3,000 followers on LinkedIn. When I post anything related to This Week in Innovation, well over 1,500 engagements on LinkedIn. And when I post, the same thing on Twitter, it's like 150. Twitter is it's full of bots. No one's paying attention to it. We'll see. But I don't think that's any place we should be. I just think it's...
Yeah, I'm fully with you. My Twitter following is, I think, 30 people. I don't put any emphasis on Twitter. I do go for it to get some news content, and I have a set of people I follow to get the news content, but that's about it. I'm not going to use... But again, if you think about this as a staged approach where you're creating content, then you're trying to disseminate it, right? So then... for all of that, you need to have an installed base, and the size of the installed base and the quality of engagement of the installed base matters. And to that extent, both Spotify and Twitter have some inherent advantages, whether we like it or not. And Clubhouse is the guy who's facing that uphill task, right? Like they have to be quick and fast, and I don't know how much money they have raised, but as a researcher, I know that Twitter has, I think, 5,000. What was it? I want to say it was like 250 million, 500 million in R&D expenditures in a quarter, last quarter. And so how are you going to compete? If they want to, they can turn all their resources on and challenge the Clubhouse environment if they want to, and that's their choice. And the fact that they haven't indicates that they might not think there's much of a future in social audio. I don't know. Or they're slow, as you just said, with some other big company. But anyway, I will pause there.
Yeah, you could take it because I'm an analyst and I'm looking for the negativity. I would say that there's so many bots on Twitter that they're afraid to do a social audio thing because if you look at how social audio works, you have to identify yourself via some kind of a mobile number, and they probably don't want to expose what percentage of those 200 million people are bots, which I think an extremely high percentage of them are.
Yeah, which brings an interesting point, right? Like with both Clubhouse, you have to actually give your phone number and all of that stuff. And
you have to give a phone number. You can use a Google Voice number, which I wish I would have thought of before I gave my number.
No, I was going to say, I might have lost you when you were speaking, but so I think you said you have to give a phone number, and I was just...
A phone number, not your phone number. You can use a Google Voice number, so you can, throw it away.
Yeah, and that's where I was heading with the site. So the bot issue, it's an issue that will plague any platform that becomes large enough.
That's true.
And you have to manage that aspect, and whether you have good enough enforcement and monitoring. And to give Twitter credit, I think they purged 20% of all users because they were found to be bots a while back, maybe a year or so back. But anyways, I'm not a big fan of Twitter, so let me be clear. But I think the bot issue is going to be an issue of success. As you get successful, you will find people figure out a way to get on there. And I think Clubhouse has had events where people have circumvented the system, and it's just natural in the evolution of any platform.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions we're going to wrestle with when you present this to your students and then you get their feedback. I'm guessing a bunch of them, and I don't know the numbers, I just know my sample size of 2 is my 2 24-year-old twins, and they both only use Spotify. They will only listen to Dad's podcast on Spotify. And even though I've asked them, please download it on iTunes because I want to say, nope, only Spotify. So I think a significant chunk of the students are going to say, let's go with Spotify. And here's the only point I want you to present to them. And it's this. Who do you really want to reach? And the answer I'm hoping the students will realize is I'd really like to reach a bunch of CIOs that are running Fortune 500 retailers. And they might or might not be on Spotify. So we just have to think of not only where the audience wants to be, but where the presenters want to be. It's also where the key audience members are. And probably a significant chunk of them are on Spotify, but a bunch aren't. A couple months down the road, that's where we're going to go.
I 100% agree with that. And that's what my comment was also, is that it depends on the audience, and each channel is figuring out who is the audience that populates that channel. And by channel, I'm talking about Clubhouse versus Green Room versus Twitter Spaces versus LinkedIn whenever it comes in versus Callin. And if you're able to build that base and a loyal base, that's just as important. It's not just acquisition, it's retention that is important. And this, Jeff, when I got on Clubhouse, I was actually on it for a while, but I barely get on it now. And so the retention aspect is just as important. And these are challenges that I'm sure they're very smart, brilliant people working in all these and trying to solve this. And I'm sure they will solve it. But these are challenges, right? Like, how do you keep them?
Well, fresh content's a tricky business. You can only talk about politics so often in the same room before it gets a little stale or whatever the case may be. Which is interesting why when I looked at Spotify on Saturday night, so I'm sure you didn't watch this, but I'm a big MMA fan, and a bunch of the kids in the neighborhood come over to the garage and we all watch the fights. And so The Ringer, which was a podcast network that was acquired by Spotify, almost at the same value point as Joe Rogan, they actually opened up a room right after the McGregor fight, and it filled up within 58 seconds. Now, I don't know how big the room was, but the point is there's clearly a market in that place where you can you're doing something right after an event and you have people that are already on the platform. And that's where I always thought Twitter might end up at, not being a place where you hang out, but a place you go to, like a NFL stadium. You don't hang out at the 49er stadium on Tuesday afternoon. You go there Sunday at 1. Where I think Clubhouse still has a potential for being a place where people more might hang out. But I think in our events, we're literally going to take them wherever we end up hosting this thing. We're going to take them to that place. We're not necessarily looking for people hanging out somewhere.
Yeah, and I will say this, right? Like I come from a customer focused perspective. Is that I think eventually I will hang out at the place that gives me the best features, that allows me to do the job that I want to with the least amount of friction, right? Make it the most easiest way to do it. Let me not have to click 100 million things. You just said Clubhouse, you have to record it, then transcribe it, and then do all that stuff. That's a lot of work, even though it takes a few minutes only. I understand that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
No, a lot more than a few minutes.
Okay.
A lot more than a few minutes.
There you go. And so why not have a platform that integrates this? And this is where, again, I guess I'm revealing my preference in some ways, is that besides the audience aspect, I think Spotify has some of the features and what you said about calling with their audiogram. If that is the case that they have, then it's an easy way to share things. Then you can just go on to LinkedIn and share it. And if you're able to access this right away, then it's a great way to do things. And so I might start leaning towards these. And I mean, Clubhouse has raised a lot of money, but I haven't seen those features. And I know I'm very restless. It's only been 4 weeks that I've been on Clubhouse myself, so I should give them a little bit more time. I get that, but
you are a tough audience, man. That was my job as an analyst to be squawky about that. You're squawkier than I am.
Hey, that's why we get along. It is that.
The two curmudgeons. See, I get to be a curmudgeon because I'm old enough. You're not old enough to be a curmudgeon.
No, I'm not a curmudgeon. Like, as I said, right, I give them huge credit for actually getting this whole sector going. And as a fan for it, I'm concerned that what I see in a lot of the research is that innovative entrant is always, in many cases, is dwarfed by the innovative second mover. And in this case, the innovative second mover happens to be some really big companies who have money. So speed and agility is an important thing. And I'm sure they're doing everything that we're talking about now, add more and a lot.
It's heresy for the startup world that I now seem to find myself in. But when I was a mainline analyst, I always thought first mover advantage was highly overrated.
I'm with you. And the other aspect of things is that like and this is why I'm a little bit generally negative about the social audio platform. The growth that is predicted for this is that there is the people who adopt it initially versus the masses. There is a difference in characteristics, right? Is this just something that the early adopters are going to adopt it and then not like the general masses are not going to? I don't know. Like myself, I just don't see myself because of time constraints, because of my inability to actually create content, because of my fear of being on a platform, because of my need to actually think through before I state anything. For a lot of reasons, I'm reluctant to be on these kind of platforms, right? So again, back to the content part, like how many people are out there who's going to create unique, high quality content that gets people wanting to come back for it more and more. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's 100% the rub, which is why when you look, and second of all, even though I grew up, and I'm a lot older than you, but I grew up with talk radio, and it's probably the reason I'm an analyst today is because I had to listen to so much talk radio as a kid because my mother loved it. But I listen to, so I don't listen to any talk radio at all. I listen to 100% podcasts. I'm listening to them at 2x normal speed. So the one thing that makes me about social audio, it drives me crazy, is I can't, when it's live, I can't speed or skip ahead.
Yeah.
So that's why your initial social audio, and I'm like, and I was cheerleading it. And then as I get into it, that's the problem is I really want to skip ahead because I know somebody's going to, in one of my rooms, I know the guys are going to do like a 2-minute vent your pitch. Gosh, how do I fast forward 2 minutes? I can't. It's live.
Okay. And there's another thing that I have found that's been my reluctance for these things is that it really does boil down to the quality of the person who's moderating the rooms and keeping things on point. 100%. And I find oftentimes that I've been in these rooms is that it deviates quite a bit from what's the advertised topic to what's being discussed. And that's a positive. It's a negative too, right? If I'm here to learn about AI bias, then if the conversation all of a sudden goes to something completely irrelevant, say merchandising, you lost me. You lost me as the person who is a follower of your content. You've lost me there. And it's difficult to recover from those experiences, in my opinion. And I might just be a very hard taskmaster on that issue. But that's my other big concern is that stay on point. I think Clubhouse rooms are like 90 minutes long, the average time. How do you talk I'm a professor. I can't talk for 90 minutes. And we are supposed to talk, we're supposed to talk for 3 hours. I think in some of my classes, and I always say, guys, 30 minutes is all I can do. And I think, Jeff, we're getting close to the 30 minutes. But
we are. One of our patriots in crime, Ricardo, some of his rooms, he can run them for an hour and a half to 2, not because he's talking, but because if you have 5 or 6 experts on a stage and you've got 15 questions coming up, you can do that. But at a certain point, there is definitely a case of diminishing returns, which is why I love the idea of leaving behind a digital footprint or an audio file that I can, if I want to go live, I can, or if I just want to dip into somebody's room and listen to 2x normal speed and skip 30% of the content, I love that idea. That's why this platform seems to me to hit a lot of the things that I'm really interested in. Live, but with the built-in ability to store.
I'm curious, does this platform also allow you to trim the content into another?
Yes. So let's see. There is a built-in editor. It's a text-based editor, so it's like a very slimmed down Descript, which I've just fallen in love with. The functionality is rudimentary compared to Descript, but it's also free, built in. So I am assuming that functionality will increase dramatically. Which then, like for me, the filler word I use a lot which is typical. My broadcast partner Brian, he uses write a lot. So in Descript, I save 5 minutes right off the bat because I delete all the ums and the rights, and it's automatic. Where this I can do it, but I think I have to manually go and delete each word, which would be a little onerous. And I don't know if I can.
Yeah, but still, it's better than the other platforms available, right? In that you're able to edit in platform, which is a nice thing. I'm saying so that too quite a bit. I just realized that.
Oh, I guarantee you. Listen, Gautham, if I dropped your audio file, I do my own editing. So I think I'm asking an intelligent question. I'm just going through my podcast that I recorded yesterday, and I have this killer speaker, and I'm asking these goofy, they're good questions, but then instead of just what I teach, I want to ask a single sentence question and then shut up. And did I do that? No. I ask a legitimate question and I pack two sentences around it like, oh my gosh, just shut up, Jeff. Ask the question, shut up, and listen. And so it's painful when you see that all in text. You go, oh man, did I blow that one?
No, but this is the whole point. This is just training ground for us to hone our communication skills and learn to speak to each other. To that extent, I'm a fan of social audio. But I'm curious about. I'm going to pivot and ask you 2 questions if you don't mind.
Sure. No, that's not allowed.
I know, but I'm still.
What do you mean? What is this? Okay, go ahead.
Ask the host question session. One thing that I found in the green room was the gamification aspect of things, right? Like you're able to give quote unquote gems to people. As a marketing person myself, I like that idea. It's a psychological trick, right? That you get people to stay engaged and stay more formal. The whole idea behind it is built off of that. I'm curious, what's your thought on that?
You know what my thought is? I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. And here's why. Because what I do for a living is I present, or I pivot off. I have a vendor or somebody present something to me, and they're not, they didn't pay Gartner the ridiculous amount of money to have me say, oh, that's lovely. Let me give you a gem. No, they paid me to say, listen, this is stupid, that's stupid, this works, but it's not gamification. Now, do I realize I'm an outlier and a dinosaur 100%? So I know I've lost that fight, but that's what I worry about, because that just feels like it's right out of a Black Mirror episode where everything is about obtaining gems. And so if you have to deliver the hard truth about something, boom, you're going to lose negative gems. But yes, I fully well realize I'm the far outlier to that equation.
No, that's a good perspective, right? So in essence, you're saying that the audience there might be a scenario where it's possible that you penalize person for stating that gem. And that's an interesting perspective. Obviously, I'm saying interesting because I myself might not agree with that. I'm hoping that people will have that gumption to say, hey, even though that was a tough point for me to consume, I like it, but it could. We'll see. The market will tell soon enough.
Here's what's happening in comedy today. There's a concept called clapter, CLAPTER, and the comics I like hate it, because the comics I like are, it's way before your time. Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Bill Burr. These guys have edge to them, okay? And so they are the exact opposite of saying something and have everyone not laugh, but clap. And that's what I worry about. That's what I worry about in the gamification of audio, is that I don't want to say something just so I get 15 gems. I want to say something that has impact. And I think the two can be, and unfortunately many times are, different.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And the reason why I asked is, like, for me, as I said, the challenge is to keep engagement, keep people coming back in for more. And this is one way to do it, right? Whether we like it or not, it is a way to get people coming back in and participating in these conversations. And that's the only solution I've seen out there so far. But let me ask one thing, because I want to actually bring this up myself, and I didn't get a chance to do it, is that all these platforms are for the creator economy, right? Whether it's a business professional sharing their business wisdom, or if it's a comedian, or if it's a musician, if it's a sports person, whatever, right? It's about creating content and sharing the content. We all agree. So there is a monetization aspect, right? We are all doing this for free in some ways. And as I understand it, all of these companies are trying to figure out ways to monetize these content. What is your perspective on it? And I'll share my perspective after I hear yours.
Yeah, so interesting. I've joined a bunch of clubhouse rooms with podcasters, and now that I'm a quote podcaster, the term monetization is talked about all the time. There's a whole business ecosystem of how to monetize your pod. Listen, I won't say what our download numbers are, but they're not going to set the world on fire. But the way I described it to somebody is the percent of top 100 most influential retail thought leaders that listen to my podcast is off the charts. So it might not have Joe Rogan numbers or anything close. But if you want to move the needle in retail, we're getting there. In 9 episodes, we're getting there. And that's, to me, 10,000 times more important. So the idea of monetization has to be viewed through what you're trying to accomplish. In my case, I'm retired. So I just want to give a platform for people that have smart ideas, because I'm bored. I was bored, sitting home and yelling at my computer screen. So my wife said, do something productive. So we're creating a platform where people that want to drive the industry can jump on it. So my monetization is just I like what I'm seeing. Other people are trying to monetize a podcast with 300 or 400 downloads. That's not going to happen. You can't do that. So you have to blow up that idea of monetization and say, what are you trying to accomplish? And that's a big problem that I think Clubhouse is seeing right now, is that they went after all these big name whatevers, and the idea was that we're going to monetize social audio. And so they basically have created sort of a cabal inside of Clubhouse, and now they're turning on Clubhouse because they're not able to, quote, monetize it. Are you driving your business? Are you exposing more fans to what you're doing? If you're spending 50 hours a week creating a Clubhouse room or 2 or 3 or 4 Clubhouse, and you're not being paid for that, that's shame on you. You got a bad model. But don't squawk at social audio because you're not being compensated for 50 hours worth of work to build a Clubhouse room. I think that's where this thing Hall has to head out. What are you accomplishing? I mean, we're at 2 million podcasts right now. Do we need 5 million podcasts? No, we need 50 good ones, not 2 million crappy ones.
I'm with you on that. And that's why I brought this up, right? Is that there is this whole issue of monetization, and for companies to be successful, these platforms to be successful, at some point they have to deal with their creators, the people like you who are hosting these podcasts, and make sure that they are getting value out of it. And I'm not going to use the word monetization, get value out of it, which could be greater amount of engagement, greater visibility amongst who you want to. But that's a challenge. And again, going back to how do you share the stuff and get it out there, I strongly believe that for the next evolution, that ability to make this visible to a larger audience is critical for the success of these platforms.
See, I think you're going to be teaching classes in about a year to 2 years of your marketing students an aspect of social audio and how to drive attention to their various business forms. I just think that might be podcast. I think that is more a podcast. Because the idea of just producing a slick newsletter, I just think feels like it's 100 years old, because it is. Where let me interview an executive, for 3 or 4 minutes and get real value out of it. That just automatically downloads into my podcast catcher. I'm going to listen to that a heck of a lot more than I'm going to read something that comes in via email that's going to sit in my spam folder for a week or 2.
Yeah, I agree. And the very first day that you guys got on Clubhouse and I couldn't, my point was that, hey, this is just a channel of communication. Everyone will use it. And there is a right time and a right place and a right audience for this. But it's not the end all be all that's been claimed to be. And I use Slack in my classroom now, and I'm sure I'll use social audio in my classroom at some point, but mostly for the pod recording abilities, not the live part. I'm not sure.
So final thoughts on social audio? You're a fan? No, wait a minute. When we started back 2 months ago, you were making fun of Ricardo and I. What are you trying to say? You think it's going to be ubiquitous? That's a reposition. I have to go back to the transcript.
No, it's not. I said then it's a channel of communication. I say now it's a channel of communication that people will use. I do not think it will have that widespread adoption. That's my personal opinion for the 4 factors that I said, right? How many people are creators? How many people, if it's live consumption, which is what it is mostly these days, right? Besides Callin Green Room now, there are other people are going to these time allocations. So you're going to peak traffic time, let's say, if on the way back home, it's when I do these things. All right, so there are 100 such podcasts. How do you get attention? So there are challenges, and I still maintain that social audio you might not want to mix Coke and Pepsi or whatever, right? It's those things is my perspective is that it's somewhere in the middle, and it still needs to identify who is the real audience and create a focused set of experiences for that. And as with every new platform, it's in an evolutionary stage, and it will evolve to the best version of it soon. But my initial comments about social audio still remain. I am not the biggest fan of it, and I don't see the long-term ramifications of it being the only channel or the preferred channel, right? It's going to be one channel, and it'll be right for the right kind of context. And the context for me are the...
So it's kind of like... It's like retail then, all these various channels we have in retail to bring product to market. The online channel, the physical store channel.
Yes.
It's almost like a multi-channel retail experience.
There you go. And it can't be one or the other, right? That's what I think the word you've used is unified commerce, right? It can't be one or the other. It has to be. But the weight you put depends on who is the person, right? I just don't know if it's been refined enough to figure out who's the audience at this point, and are we really creating value, and not we, are they creating value? And they will figure it out. You just have to be as academic. I can pontificate. They have the hard job of getting things done with resource constraints, right? But hopefully these things push the conversation further and get the focus on delivering value to customers.
Okay, and since we've been going almost an hour, thank you, sir, for graciously giving me this much time to berate you as much as possible. My hot take would be LinkedIn has a social audio channel within 6 months. And for our line of work, me in retail and you in the education of future retail leaders, that think that's going to be the killer app for us, whoever ends up there. And I think the way Callin has dialed this thing in with the ability to record these rooms and save them solves your problem specifically. Yep. That you can jump in a live room if you want to have a live audience ask questions of thought leaders, but then you can just go to one platform and pick up all the content and listen at 2x normal speed. So I think they really have figured that one out, and it's going to be fascinating to watch this thing evolve.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch how this evolves, right? Like, we're all armchair quarterbacks at this point. It'll be great to see how this evolves and, see who ends up the winner. And I'm assuming there'll be some losers in this as well, but time will tell.
Yeah, it's free market economy. So if there's going to be winners, there got to be losers, or at least they get acquired. So the big thing to watch is, what does LinkedIn do? Are they building something themselves, or they make an acquisition?
Yeah.
That's going to be the one to watch.
Yep.
Good deal. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
With that,
thank you.
Always a thoughtful conversation. And I am counting down the days till we get all these students up in front of a bunch of grizzled old retail executives and see how they do.
It's only 2 months, I think. September is coming right around the corner. So hang in there.
Sounds good. All right,
Jeff.
Talk to you later. With that, we'll close the room out. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode. For more info, refer to the pod notes below. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us grow. I'm your host, Jeff Roster, analyst at large. If you want to connect, follow us on Twitter at JeffPR or at Brian Sathianathan, or connect with us on LinkedIn. Visit my website at roster.retail.com or Brian's at Iterate.ai. Until next time, stay safe and have a great week.